Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really different.
Oh,
A deep dive into just one source.
okay.
Former President Trump's interview on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Interesting.
Now, before you think this is about politics,
Right.
it's not.
Okay.
Think of it more like we're examining a fascinating historical document,
I like that.
but way more entertaining.
Well, what's captivating is just how many topics are covered in this interview.
Right.
I mean, we're going to explore everything.
Everything.
From Trump's move into the White House
Yeah.
to his thoughts on nuclear power, tariffs, and
Even UFOs.
yeah, it's a wild ride for sure.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
So buckle up, everybody.
Yeah.
We're here to point out those unexpected nuggets that'll have you thinking, wait, I never knew that about Trump.
Exactly.
For example, Trump talks about that transition from the apprentice
Right.
to the Oval Office.
Right.
And he actually describes the experience as surreal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he contrasts this feeling with a much more intense experience. The time he was shot during a campaign speech.
Oh, wow.
He told Rogan that that moment actually felt strangely more grounded than walking into the Lincoln bedroom for the first time.
That's a powerful comparison.
Yeah.
What do you think he's getting at?
I think it speaks to the weight of history he felt taking on that role.
Hmm.
You have to remember, he came in as a complete outsider,
Yeah.
someone with absolutely no government experience, and suddenly he's thrust into the most powerful position in the world.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how anyone could truly prepare for that.
Absolutely. And he often talks about relying on established figures for appointments,
Yeah.
but found many to be resistant to change.
Really?
He even called them stiffs. He specifically expresses regret over appointing John Bolton as National Security Advisor,
Oh, interesting.
saying a friend, casino magnate Phil Ruffin, had actually warned him about Bolton's potential for, well, creating chaos.
So this suggests that despite his outsider status,
Yeah.
Trump still relied on advice, even if he didn't always follow it.
Yeah.
It really highlights those challenges any president faces, regardless of their background,
I agree.
in navigating the complexities of Washington.
And speaking of complexities,
Yeah.
no conversation about Trump is complete without mentioning the media.
Of course.
He repeatedly criticizes the media's portrayal of his presidency, claiming they intentionally distorted information and focused on negativity to undermine his agenda.
Wow.
He even brings up a specific instance with 60 Minutes,
Uh-huh.
where he alleges they deceptively edited an interview
Really?
to misrepresent his stance on crime statistics.
So this is a recurring theme throughout the interview, right?
It is.
This sense of battling against a system he perceives as biased and unfair.
Exactly.
And he extends this criticism to the 2020 election as well,
Right.
echoing claims made by figures like J.D. Vance about the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Yeah.
He essentially suggests that the media, along with social media companies, downplayed this story to influence the election.
It's interesting how he connects these seemingly separate issues,
Yeah.
media portrayal and election integrity.
Uh-huh.
It reveals a lot about how he views the forces at play in American politics.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to another major theme,
Okay.
his economic policies.
Right.
He spends a good chunk of the interview defending his tax cuts and tariffs, claiming they were the drivers behind the booming economy pre-pandemic.
He argues these policies would have ultimately led to a reduction in the national debt
Okay.
and stresses the importance of economic growth as a top priority.
I see.
He even suggests a pretty radical idea,
Whoa.
replacing income tax with tariffs entirely,
Whoa.
citing historical examples from the late 19th century when the U.S. had a strong economy with high tariffs.
It's definitely a controversial idea.
Oh, yeah.
It shows just how unconventional his thinking can be.
For sure.
And this unconventional thinking extends to his views on energy and the environment as well.
Yeah.
He's a strong advocate for nuclear power, dismissing windmills as inefficient, environmentally harmful, and aesthetically unpleasant.
He even voices concerns about the impact of wind farms on whale populations,
Really?
citing recent increases in whale beachings as potential evidence.
Interesting.
It's a unique perspective on environmental issues,
For sure.
one that often diverges from mainstream environmentalist viewpoints.
He also criticizes California's energy policies, highlighting the irony of their electric car mandate alongside their frequent brownouts.
I see.
Again, he's pointing out what he perceives as hypocrisy and ineffective leadership from his political opponents.
It seems like a pattern for him,
Yeah,
identifying what he sees as flaws and inconsistencies in the systems he's critiquing.
exactly.
But this is especially evident when we get to the 2020 election.
Right.
Unsurprisingly, Trump reiterates his claims of a stolen election,
Okay.
zeroing in on concerns about mail-in ballots and possible voting machine vulnerabilities.
He even mentions Elon Musk's support for paper ballots as validation for these concerns. And he criticizes Democratic opposition to voter ID laws,
Yeah.
suggesting it's motivated by a desire to manipulate the system.
He cites a recent case in Virginia
Uh-huh.
where thousands of illegal ballots were discovered,
Wow.
highlighting this as proof of the need for stricter election security measures.
This seems to connect back to his distrust of institutions and his belief in a rigged system,
Yes,
which he applies to various areas.
it does.
But what about his stance on health and the pharmaceutical industry?
This is where we see Trump's interest in partnering with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Mm.
to address what he perceives as major health issues in America.
Okay.
He's particularly focused on diet and the influence of big pharma,
Interesting.
even showing Rogan a chart that compares the U.S. unfavorably to other countries when it comes to health outcomes and spending.
He expresses skepticism about certain pharmaceuticals and vaccines,
Right.
aligning with some of RFK Jr.'s more controversial stances.
Yeah.
It's definitely an unexpected area of focus for him. But it speaks to his willingness to challenge conventional thinking, even in areas seemingly unrelated to politics.
It's almost as if he's searching for solutions outside the established systems he distrusts,
Yeah.
whether it's in healthcare or politics.
Now, before we move on to the next part,
Okay.
where we delve into Trump's foreign policy views,
Right.
I'm curious, what has stood out to you so far in this deep dive?
I think what's striking is his consistency in framing himself as an outsider,
Okay.
battling against what he sees as rigged systems.
Right.
It's evident in his views on the media, the election, and even healthcare.
Uh-huh.
He's built a narrative around challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
and it's clearly resonating with a significant portion of the population.
It's definitely a theme worth pondering.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder
Yeah.
how much of Trump's appeal stems from this outsider persona
Right.
and his willingness to challenge the perceived elites.
Something to think about. As we move on to explore his equally captivating and controversial foreign policy views in the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Right, so,
As we delve into this second part of exploring Trump's interview on Rogan,
yeah.
get ready, because we're diving into the world of foreign policy.
And knowing Trump, this is going to be anything but predictable.
Oh, yeah.
Right off the bat,
Okay.
he just unleashes this wave of criticism toward the Biden administration's handling of the Afghanistan withdrawal,
Right.
labeling it a complete disaster and a humiliation for the United States.
It's interesting how he fixates on those chaotic scenes at the Kabul airport.
Right.
Americans and Afghan allies desperately trying to get out
Yeah.
as the Taliban took control.
Yeah.
It's a potent visual.
It is.
And one that clearly fuels his frustration.
He places the blame squarely on the decision to pull out troops before ensuring the safe evacuation of American citizens and Afghan allies.
And this feeds directly into his broader foreign policy outlook. He believes this move projected weakness on the global stage,
Okay.
emboldening America's adversaries and undermining its credibility.
He asserts that if he had been in charge,
Right.
the withdrawal would have been far more orderly
Okay.
and would have maintained America's standing in the eyes of the world.
Of course, it's impossible to definitively say how things would have unfolded under different leadership.
Right.
But this claim reveals a lot about Trump's core belief in projecting strength and dominance in foreign policy.
Okay.
He sees it as the key to deterring aggression and maintaining global order.
He consistently contrasts his approach with what he perceives as Biden's weakness and indecisiveness,
Yeah.
and argues that this perceived vulnerability has made America a prime target.
For example, he contends that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would never have occurred under his watch. He asserts that Putin wouldn't have dared to make such a move
Right.
because he knew Trump would have responded with overwhelming force.
So this claim is likely rooted in his self-proclaimed strongman image and his belief that projecting an image of power is the most effective deterrent.
Right.
However, it overlooks the complexities of geopolitical dynamics
Of course.
and all the factors that contributed to the conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah, those are important.
He also lays blame on Biden for the recent Hamas attack on Israel,
Okay.
arguing that the administration's policies emboldened Hamas
Right.
and increased the likelihood of such an attack.
He criticizes Biden's response to the attack as weak and ineffective,
Yeah.
further reinforcing his narrative of a feckless administration
Right.
incapable of protecting American interests.
It's a recurring pattern for Trump.
It is.
He adopts a hardline stance,
Yeah.
paints his opponents as weak and indecisive,
Yeah.
and positions himself as the sole figure capable of safeguarding America's security.
Whether or not you agree with this approach,
Right.
there's no denying that this strongman persona and his emphasis on military might resonates with a lot of Americans.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
let's explore Trump's perspective on China, a country that features prominently in his foreign policy discussions.
He accuses China of engaging in widespread theft of American jobs and intellectual property, and argues that previous administrations were far too lenient,
Okay.
allowing China to exploit unfair trade practices.
He boasts about his own aggressive stance toward China,
Yeah.
imposing tariffs and implementing measures aimed at pressuring them to change their behavior.
He claims that his policies were beginning to yield results,
Well, it's-
forcing China to make concessions and prompting the return of manufacturing jobs to the U.S.
However, it's important to acknowledge that the economic relationship between the U.S. and China is incredibly complex,
It is.
making it difficult to isolate the precise impact of Trump's policies.
While his actions undoubtedly introduced a more confrontational dynamic into the relationship,
Yeah.
their long-term effects on the global economy are still unfolding.
Another country that frequently pops up in the conversation is North Korea.
Right.
Trump, of course, made history by meeting with Kim Jong-un in 2018
He did.
in an attempt to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula.
He reflects on this meeting with a sense of pride, claiming to have forged a strong personal connection with Kim Jong-un.
He suggests that he made significant strides toward denuclearization,
Right.
though he avoids getting into specific details.
This assertion is difficult to verify,
Yeah.
as North Korea's nuclear program remains shrouded in secrecy,
Right.
and concrete evidence of progress has been limited.
He also draws a stark contrast between his approach and that of previous administrations, asserting that he was willing to engage directly with Kim Jong-un,
Okay.
while others were too apprehensive to do so.
While it's impossible to know the true impact of Trump's North Korea policy,
Yeah.
his willingness to engage directly with Kim Jong-un,
Right.
a move unprecedented in American history,
Yes.
certainly shifted the dynamics of the relationship,
Yeah.
at least temporarily.
Moving beyond individual nations,
Okay.
Trump lays out a broader vision for American foreign policy.
Centered around putting American interests first, above all else, and avoiding entanglement in foreign conflicts that don't directly benefit the U.S.
This is the essence of his America First philosophy,
Right.
a concept that has resonated strongly with many of his supporters,
Yeah.
who believe that America has been too quick to intervene in other countries' affairs.
He also directs his criticism toward international organizations like NATO and the United Nations,
Right.
deeming them ineffective and arguing that they often undermine American sovereignty.
He advocates for a more selective approach to alliances,
Yeah.
believing that America should only partner with countries that share its values and interests.
This vision of American foreign policy is deeply rooted in skepticism toward globalism
It is.
and a firm belief in American exceptionalism.
Right.
It's a perspective that appeals to a segment of the population
Yeah.
who feel that America has shouldered an unfair burden in global affairs.
However, Trump's foreign policy views are not without their detractors.
Many foreign policy experts contend that his approach is overly simplistic and fails to grasp the complexities of the modern world.
They point to his withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Agreement
Yeah.
as prime examples of his inclination to abandon international agreements
Right.
and potentially alienate American allies.
They argue that his America First philosophy is ultimately short-sighted
Okay.
and will harm American interests in the long run.
By disengaging from the global stage,
Right.
they fear that America will relinquish its leadership role to countries like China,
Yeah.
making the world a more unstable and less secure place.
Trump supporters, however, counter that his critics are part of a so-called deep state establishment,
Okay.
out of touch with the concerns of everyday Americans.
They argue that Trump's policies are genuinely putting America first,
Right.
strengthening the country's position on the world stage.
This back and forth highlights the deep divisions within American society regarding the nation's role in global affairs and the best approach to navigating the challenges of the 21st century.
The one final point worth noting is Trump's unwavering emphasis on military strength and his willingness to use force.
He expresses unshakable confidence in America's military capabilities, believing it to be the most formidable force in the world, capable of projecting American power and influence globally.
He also asserts that America must be prepared to wage war if necessary, to defend its interests and safeguard its allies.
This belief in military power as a primary tool of foreign policy is a consistent thread woven throughout Trump's rhetoric, appealing to those who prioritize security and a projection of strength.
His critics, however, caution against this reliance on military might, arguing that it undervalues the importance of diplomacy and international cooperation.
They believe that Trump's approach is likely to escalate conflicts rather than resolve them, making the world a more dangerous and unpredictable place.
This debate reflects a fundamental disagreement over the role of military force and the most effective way to ensure national security.
As we wrap up this segment of our deep dive, it's evident that Trump's foreign policy views are a complex and controversial tapestry.
They are.
Woven with threads of strength, skepticism, and a deeply ingrained belief in American exceptionalism.
His perspective is a fascinating window into a worldview that both captivates and concerns.
It does.
Driving a wedge between those who find his approach reassuring and those who fear its potential consequences.
Now, in the final part of our exploration, we'll shift gears once again, moving away from the realm of policy and politics, to delve into some of the more personal and philosophical insights that emerge from this wide-ranging interview.
We'll explore Trump's thoughts on topics ranging from personal success to family dynamics to his outlook on life itself.
It's an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the man behind the persona and the forces that have shaped his unique perspective on the world.
Stay tuned for part 3. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In this final part of our look at Trump's interview with Joe Rogan, we're shifting gears from policy and politics to something more personal. We're going to kind of delve into the man behind the policies. Unpack his self-perception, his values, and what might make him tick.
It's fascinating because while we've analyzed his stances on all these different issues, this interview also reveals a lot about how he sees himself and how he views the world around him. One theme that keeps popping up is this sense of being an outsider. This idea that he's constantly battling against a system that he believes is rigged against him.
We see this sentiment come up in different contexts throughout the interview.
We do.
Whether he's talking about his frustrations with what he calls the deep state, his clashes with the media, or his unwavering belief that the 2020 election was stolen from him.
It's as if he relishes this underdog role. This idea of being a lone warrior, fighting for the common man against all these corrupt elites.
And this ties into another key aspect of his personality. This unwavering self-belief.
Yeah, you're right.
Throughout the interview, we hear this unshakable confidence in his own instincts and abilities. He rarely, if ever, admits to making mistakes and often deflects blame onto others.
Even when he's presented with evidence that contradicts his claims, he doubles down on his own version of reality.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's a fascinating psychological trait.
It is.
This inability or unwillingness to accept fault. And it seems to be deeply ingrained in his personality.
This combination of outsider status and unwavering self-belief seems to be a really powerful mix.
It is.
And it's arguably a major factor in his appeal to a certain segment of the population.
They see him as a disruptor, someone who's not afraid to challenge the norms and fight for what he believes in, even if it means going against the grain.
Now, beyond politics, the interview also gives us these little glimpses into Trump's personal life and values. He talks about his family, his business successes, and even his love of golf.
He even shares an anecdote about his son Barron's extensive knowledge of UFC fighters, which offers a more humanizing glimpse into a figure who's often portrayed as larger than life.
It does.
It's a reminder that behind the political persona, there's a father, a family man.
Yeah.
Someone with personal interests and connections.
Yeah, and throughout these more personal moments, you really get a sense of his deep-seated pride in his accomplishments.
Yeah.
And this fierce loyalty to those he considers close.
Yeah, I think that comes through.
But perhaps the most revealing part of the interview is when Trump discusses his governing style.
Interesting.
He readily admits to relying heavily on his gut instincts rather than getting bogged down in detailed policy analysis.
So he's more of a big-picture thinker.
Yeah.
Someone who trusts his own intuition over expert opinions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He also prefers to surround himself with people who are demonstrably loyal to him. Rather than those who might challenge his views or offer dissenting opinions.
So it's a leadership style that some might call decisive?
Yeah.
While others might see it as impulsive or even reckless.
Right. He's not afraid to make decisions that go against conventional wisdom or that might stir up controversy.
He seems to thrive on shaking things up and challenging the status quo.
He does. It's a governing style that's both intriguing and concerning.
Yeah.
Depending on your perspective.
I can see that.
On the one hand, it's kind of refreshing to see a leader who's willing to break from tradition and think outside the box.
But on the other hand, it's understandable why some might be a little apprehensive about a leader who seems to prioritize impulsiveness over deliberation and loyalty over expertise.
So what does this all mean for the future of American politics?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And a question that's really tough to answer definitively.
Yeah.
But this interview suggests that Trump's brand of populism, with this mix of outsider appeal, unwavering self-belief, and disdain for political correctness, is likely to remain a powerful force in American politics for years to come.
Love him or hate him.
Yeah.
There's no denying that Trump is a figure unlike any other in American history.
He's tapped into a deep vein of discontent.
Yes.
And channeled it into a political movement that continues to resonate with a significant portion of the population.
This interview gives us a rare and unfiltered glimpse into the mind of a man who continues to captivate and confound the nation.
It does. It lets us peek behind the curtain and see the man behind the persona.
And while it might not provide all the answers,
it
definitely raises a lot of thought-provoking questions.
It does.
About leadership, then the nature of power, and the direction of American politics.
As we wrap up our deep dive into this extraordinary interview, we're left with a sense of wonder, a little bit of bewilderment.
I get it.
And a whole lot to think about.
That's the beauty of the deep dive.
I think so.
It's about sparking your curiosity, encouraging you to think critically, and challenging you to explore these topics further on your own.
Because ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we believe, and to shape the future we want to see.
So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the complexities of the world around us.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. And until next time, stay curious.